Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Healing with Hila. This is your space for aligning, expanding, and reconnecting with who you truly are. I'm your host, Hila Ferguson. I'm a transpersonal hypnotherapist, life coach, and energy worker. Thank you so much for inviting me into your life. I really wanted to talk about expectations and just a place of hope and where all of this sits. And I really enjoyed sharing with you guys my conversation with my husband, James, of 22 years. And there was another piece that we recorded at the same time that was around his work situation. And so I'm going to incorporate that in today's episode. I feel like it fits really, really well with this theme. And like I said, I really enjoyed sharing that part with you guys. I started to tune in and meditate and ask my team to help me understand this subject a little bit deeper. And it's funny because they've reminded me that it's very helpful for me to look at the definition of something because it brings me into the vibration of the word and just kind of gives me some pieces that I wanted to understand deeper. So they asked me to look up the definition of expectation and to look up the definition of hope. And I thought it was so great. Expectation is a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. And again, that kind of gave me so many amazing pieces. The piece around it being a belief, the piece around it being grounded in the future. And then looking at the definition of hope, hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. And I thought how cool it is that spirit brought it together for me through the definition. And I felt like it was a bit similar to the place of worry and anxiety, where one is more rooted in the thought process body, the mental body, and one is more rooted in the emotional body. Yet they really are very similar. And so it allowed me to really, again, get a deeper understanding of this thing, right, that we have as human beings, this expectation of a certain result to happen, and how that sits, into the feeling of hope, being hopeful that something is going to happen. And when it doesn't, too, the impact that it has on us. And so I asked to just understand deeper that space of disappointment and to understand the space that I find myself move into, and I think many people, where we taper the hope, right? There's like, oh, you don't want to get your hopes up. You kind of do this thing where you're like, well, I got to consider, what it's going to look like if I didn't, get it right now, or it didn't look like that. And I was wondering why sometimes that space, right, feels more comfortable. It almost feels like, it does in a way make the landing not as jarring. And I know the important role that my feelings have in my life, being my guidance system and really helping me and understand, how to kind of sift through my life and land on the things that I want. And so I asked them to help me understand that piece too. Why does it feel better in certain situations to taper that hope, to bring those expectations down? And so they showed me this graph, they showed me this scale, right? They've opened up this line and they called it time. They're like, this is just your time, right? Your human time, your idea of now and tomorrow and future. They showed it to me more like from now beyond, so into the future, because we were talking, expectations and hope and things that are rooted in the future. And they said, you start on this feeling super hopeful. Your expectations are high. You cleared up your wanted. And you run it. But because we are such a conditioned human being, and we are so tied into the observed aspect of our reality, the linear timeline of our reality, the more you run on it and you have not received in physical reality that you are hoping for, that you are expecting to have, the more you change your trajectory from wanted to the lack of wanted. Now you are more aware of how it is that you don't have that thing that you set out feeling super hopeful about with high expectations. And so when you're in the space of the lack of wanted, right, you're really in a lower vibrational space. And so to hold on to a high frequency of hope, to hold on to a high frequency of expectation in that space, it's impossible. The vibrations cannot exist together. And so tapering our hope comes in. It feels easier. It feels better to just lower that piece, to just move into that slower frequency, to just, shift the expectation to something a little less. And it is truly because we shifted the trajectory. We moved from the focus of the wanted to the focus of the lack of wanted. And they really drove the point of helping me get very aware when I start to feel better, to lower my expectations. When I start to feel better, to taper my hope, means that I need to become extremely mindful because my trajectory moved from I wanted to the lack of wanted. Somehow down that timeline, I missed that momentum of trust. I missed that momentum of focusing on truly on what I want and seeing it and believing it coming into my reality. And they also really showed me and had me scan the other way, right? When I'm in the trajectory of wanted, when I'm in the trajectory of that hope, really focused, right, on that expectation of what I want coming in for me, then tapering it feels awful. Picking a different expectation that, is lower vibration, it doesn't feel good at all. And so the opposite is true as well. And it's very, very accurate. And so it had me really open up again into the question of expectations and hope, and just asking my guides and spirit to help me land in a space that is serving. I really loved the piece about being aware, and they explained it so well to me. And now they brought in the process of wanted, right? How do I manage expectations in a way that is serving? And so I wanted to read this card to you guys because it was awesome in the way that it put a few things into perspective for me that again landed me on a process of expectation that resonated with the things that we want to bring in. Here it is. I like understanding that things are always evolving. And while there are many things that could be better where I am, it is not really a problem because where I am is constantly changing to something better. I like knowing that as I look for the best things around me where I am, those things become more prevalent in my experience. It is fun to know that things are always working out for me. And as I watch for the evidence of that, I see more evidence of that every day. And so, what I loved about the card is that it allowed me to put a couple key points into my expectations that will then continue to bring me into that space of wanted. And one is that everything is always evolving and ever changing. The only constant is change, always, always, always. Nothing is ever, ever stagnant. Nothing ever stays the same. And if everything is always evolving and always changing, just like it can change in the direction that I don't want, it can change back into the direction that I do want. And if I hold on to the expectation that everything that is happening to me is happening for me, that everything is always working out for me for my highest good, that expectation is ever evolving. And no matter what happens along my way, it will never be looked at as lack of that. It is that reframing that I have to do and look at it and say, just because it didn't turn out in the way that I expected it to, if my expectations does not sit into the physical result of what this needs to look like, if my expectation sits into the belief that everything is always working out for me, then I can never be disappointed. I will never experience that disappointment and I will never need to taper down my hope. And again, if I take into consideration and expect that everything is going to continue to change and evolve, but always for me, for my highest good, then again, I sit into the ultimate expectation. And I think it's a good process to have, right? When we get caught up into the physical results that are not coming, when we get caught up into the lack of our wanted, to take that step back into that broader perspective of everything is always working out for my highest good. And I can just expect that. It will change everything. It will just put us back into this trajectory of wanted and then get us the things that we want faster in physical reality. And so I think it would be a good time for us to move into that segment that I recorded with James. It was funny too because he was sick. He took a day off work because he wasn't feeling well. And you'll even hear there's a part where he doesn't even get it yet, and later we talked about it, where he truly manifested, just feeling unwell and not going into work. And when he talks about just the feelings that he's had, and, it makes all the sense, right? That our body will create a condition that will keep us more, in what we want, which is not, being physically there. I hope you enjoy our little chat. Here it is. What do you want to talk about? about your job.
Yeah.
Fine.
I think I like it.
Well, would you care to elaborate?
Well, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm trying to figure it out. Is it because I don't like the work? Is it because I don't like the place? Is it because when I changed jobs, I built like this false narrative around, what the experience was going to be, and it hasn't been that. So now, like, I'm having these, you know, disappointments or regrets or whatever, which are totally unfounded because it's not like we discussed it, right? It's not like anything was ever promised to me, and said, oh well, if you do XYZ,
Yeah, but you did have an
happen.
expectation.
So but I did, and I created those expectations myself, and none of those things have come to fruition, you know and I find myself, quietly working away, and the thought enters my head of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to be here. I just, like,
Yeah, and that's why we're sick.
huh?
That's why we're sick. That's why we, are not going to work because we're sick.
So, and like I said, I don't know if I like, it's because I don't know, I don't know. Um, at first the not speaking, with clients while working, it was fun, right? It was not a big deal. Um, but I don't know, sometimes I feel like, like there's something missing
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It
It shouldn't be a rule one way or another.
There's never.
If somebody wants to process as they're speaking, then there should be a space for it. And if somebody doesn't, then there should be a space for it.
Right.
It shouldn't be a rule.
And if I feel something going on in someone's body because I'm an intuitive body worker, I feel like I should be able to tell them that in the moment and not have to whisper something or wait until the end when I really don't have time because I got to get to the next person.
Right.
And I don't have 5, 10, 20 minutes to go in depth with you about anything. So it's, so.
So I'll pause you real quick. This is really good, right? Because what you're doing is you're clarifying the points that you don't want, that you don't like, that bring you into the points that you do like, right? You moved from a space of recognizing, right, that having this rule is something that you don't like, and it brought you into clarifying that you are intuitive body worker, that there's a space for you to express things to your clients during your sessions if it's right. So that's really good because that's showing you that you're not able to show up fully in your job. So that's good. That's a good point of why you don't like it. What else?
Well, like I said, I think some of it is just this, the narrative I created, right? That, since the person who asked me to leave my current job and come to work for him, right? I had worked for him before, right? In the past for a good amount of years. So, and I worked for him in a leadership capacity, right? Not just a therapist capacity.
Right. So you expected it to happen.
So I guess I did have some expectation that, that was why he was so gung ho to have me. What I figured out, or what I believe I've learned, right, since then, is, two reasons he wanted me to come, I think, right? A, because he knows I'm good at my job as far as body work goes. He sees me as, he sends friends and family to see me. But also because at the previous place, any person who like complained about every therapist that they saw, right? He sent them to me, and they were always happy after.
So that's a good thing. So you know that you were valued, but here's another really great point you're making, right? You're noticing that you don't like the fact that you are not in a leadership role of some sort. Leadership, teaching, guiding, whatever, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the things he had, in the beginning was like, dude, we want you to be, the teaching background, we want you to be trainer,
Yes.
right? And they
It doesn't matter.
literally hired a dozen
Okay.
people that somebody, one of the other therapists,
Yes.
you know.
But that's a really great point because you are creating your reality. So you are the one that's blocking this from coming in. And even though an opportunity was actually laid on the table to do this, you still, right, were standing in your own whatever vibrational way from calling it in. So what you're doing right now is really good. And I will challenge you, right? And again, point out that it's none of them. It's you. And actually, it's even deeper you, right? Because you're saying there was an actual physical opportunity that was being discussed, right? Dreamed and created that was then either not given to me or not created. So it's it's you starting to say, I really would like that, and then vibrationally going, but, and then blocking it from entering. And now sitting here and doing all this other work and starting to feel more closer to your, alignment, closer to your vortex, closer to the things that you want. You're like, okay, there's something off here. This doesn't feel right. There's something I need to look at, right? I'm thinking about these things. But again, I'll bring it in again. It has nothing to do with them. And literally, your words are just proving it because, like, you're talking about your boss valuing you, seeing your, how good you are and bringing you on board. So, again, very easy to create a space of that, yet there was some kind of block that wasn't doing it. Whatever reason, right? You weren't paid for it, so you didn't want to do it. You didn't feel like you were really being valued, like it was just extra work. Whatever the narrative, that you brought in that blocked it. So that's a good question, right? You're the creator of your reality, and this is something that you would like to do. Why do you think you were, blocking it, at least in this job capacity?
Don't know. Like I said, I'm pretty confused. I'm not exactly sure what is going on. So I don't know if it's the place. I don't know if it's situational. Like I don't know.
It could just mean this the simple fact of taking on more responsibility and like just feeling complacent and happy and like doing the minimum because you're feeling overwhelmed in other areas in your life. So you don't want to really take on more work, underlying vibration. It was funny. It was kind of like my session. It's like, that's kind of like a comfortable space. It's a comfortable spot, for me to just host
It's
at.
easy.
It's
Maybe,
easy. Yeah.
maybe, and I don't know, maybe that's part of it. I don't feel challenged
I
like
don't want
at all, but I do like to be challenged.
but
That's
it's
why I married you.
and so most that's what I mean, right? So you're getting it, right? You're getting it from me. You're definitely getting it from our, girls. And so there's definitely a
Well,
possibility that there's a part of you that's going, I don't want to get it anywhere else. Please give me the minimum. Let me do the minimum of the minimum and request me the minimum of the minimum and pay me the minimum of the minimum.
yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know, like, you can remember when I worked for the other place, right, where conversation was pretty norm, right? And I had people who had extreme opposing views to
Yeah.
mine, right? Um,
And that sucked too.
Sometimes, but sometimes we would also have actually like, really respectful conversations about those views, right? And so it enlightened me to what other people were thinking. And my hope, right? Obviously, I cannot speak for someone else, but my hope is that, it did the same for them. I assume that it did because they would return and want to like literally pick up where we left
Yes.
off, last week or last month or
And
whatever.
I very much
You know?
remember that was the times where you were in balance with your work. And when you were out of balance with your work, all I heard was how awful it is to keep listening to people, being on the other ends of the spectrum,
Yeah,
challenging you. And, where you have to keep quiet and you can't say anything and you have to keep seeing them. So
yeah,
again,
yeah.
you
But then
are the filter.
because what happened though, I think there was because I think we talked about it and you were like, well, what are you doing about it? Like, and I made a conscious decision of, yeah, you know what? I don't need to eat anybody's garbage. I don't have to just sit here and, listen to them spew whatever,
Right. So okay.
hate
So
or
okay. So
whatever,
it was a lesson
right?
in boundaries,
So I
right?
started challenging people, when they would come with that kind of stuff,
Fine.
right? I would just be like, okay, well, what about, and not usually what aboutisms, because that's, not good. But I would try to, get them to maybe see a different, perspective, right? Like I can remember a guy bitching about the whole trans thing, right? And, I told him about my friend in high school who we all knew was gay, right? And then came out like much later, and we were like, dude, duh. Like we've known this since like eighth grade, right? We don't care, right? But I remember later in life thinking about that situation, after knowing other, couples and our friends and whatever, and thinking how difficult that must have been for him, right? Or anybody, right? Depending on how you're raised, your parents, all that kind of stuff, right? At the end of that, right, this person had literally said, I had never thought of it, like that before.
Okay.
You
So it
know,
was an opportunity at your job where you were like talking to someone and you had the ability to like through that exchange bring forth some,
just a different
change or a different
perspective.
perspective. I get it. You're back to your wants. That's fine. Asking for
Yep.
that and clearing that like this is something that you still want is fine. But like I said, my point to you was is that I remember where that piece of your job you hated and you bitched about constantly.
Yeah.
And you would looked very forward to a space where you didn't have to. And so my point in this is just as the observer and your wife is that it's all your filter. It's all your filter. It's like when you are in alignment and when you're feeling good, you are able to hold conversations that are meaningful and you're able to hold space in your job for conversations that, promote healing for the person, whether what's going on with them or beyond. And all of that. And you enjoy it and they enjoy it, even if it's challenging, everybody kind of win-win from it. And when you're not in alignment, when you're in a space that doesn't feel good for whatever reason, job, not job, the interactions you have with your clients and with people are negative. And those conversations are, combative and they're not nice and they're not good feeling. And at the end, you just don't feel good at all, you know? And so again, it's getting clear and understanding that it's fine to stand here and say, I don't like the rules of my job because there's aspects of what I'm good at that I feel
You
like
know,
I have to shut
yeah,
down.
but you know what? Honestly, I'm sitting here thinking about it. And you know what? Bottom line, what it really comes down to is, I'm the only person, like, really, I'm thinking about this, right? I'm like, what's got me
Mhm.
irritated? I'm the only person from the original staff when this place opened 2 years ago that's still there. The only one. I'm
Okay.
the only one who stuck it out. I'm the only one that persevered. I'm the only one that, you know, put forth some effort for this place to be successful, right? And again, it's my own expectation that brings these disappointments, and I understand that. That's what expectations do, right? Nobody's here to please me. They're not here to make me happy, right? But the fact that that hasn't been acknowledged, and I'm not saying I expect a thank you or a
So what do you,
bonus,
so
or
what's
but
acknowledgement
you
are
know
you
what I
looking
mean, like
for?
the fact that I don't feel like that has even been acknowledged.
But what is acknowledgement then if it's not what you just listed?
Well, I
What do you
guess that
want?
that would be one form of
So
acknowledgement.
what do you
So
want? So again, what a beautiful example of the mixed rockets
yeah, yeah,
sending
right,
into the
right.
universe. And the piece about, again, I will challenge you. You want a reward for saying to the universe that you have persevered, stayed stuck in a space for 2 years where other people have woken up into the fact that it didn't fit them, it didn't align for them for whatever reason, and moved on. You want to be rewarded for choosing to be literally, you used the word persevere. You didn't use the word thrive, enjoyed, like what you didn't even use the word worked. And so again, what a and you want to be rewarded for it. You want to be, like, and so the universe ain't rewarding, and the bosses ain't rewarding, and the money's not rewarding, and nothing is rewarding, and the interactions with clients aren't as rewarding, and nothing is rewarding. But it's you that has, chose to stay stuck and stagnant, right, for whatever reason we discussed very, short time ago, of like, like not really wanting to be challenged, even though you like to be challenged, not really, being comfortable. It's easy. It's a really, like, you can call, off whenever you want to. There's no real, like, you can pretty much do whatever you want with your schedule. There's like insane amount of freedom, and it's fine for whatever reason. Like, but again, you are the one that chose this, and nobody's going to reward this if it doesn't feel in alignment. And no amount of action is going to change this. And I think that that's like the biggest thing, right? Like, I was just talking to my client. She's like, I'm quitting. And I'm like, you can. And guess what? The vibration is going to follow you. You're going to recreate this.
Yeah.
You have to figure out,
Yeah.
right? And so then we go deeper. Because honestly, everything, like, underneath everything all, like, lies underneath everything all, I feel like, is forgiveness and deserving. There's a form of punishment we're running. There's a form of anger at self. There's a form of something that you're still upset at yourself for in this life or beyond, whatever it is, right? That you're running, that has causing, the perfect breeding ground to undeserving, to undeserved, not deserving really what you were worth for your talents, the fact that you're making so little money, like you are like next level therapist. There's a huge undeserving, current. And so solve these things, and then the work will figure itself out. If there's a calling for being a leader and, being in some form of that, like, leadership role, then figure out why you are blocking it. Find spots and places in your life where you're in that role and you're really thriving and enjoying it, and grow that. And then it would come in other ways. And being stuck in the why, like in the beginning, and you're like, it's fine. Don't worry about the why. Why is stupid. Why is just, why you're here. It doesn't matter. Unwanted brought you here. And now you have to soften your gaze on all the things that aren't working. And you have to just utilize time to grow what is.
Well, that sucks. Why can't I just get it straight away?
You can. You can. You can manifest in an instant if you can release the resistance in an instant. 100% you can. It's funny. I recorded, my mini podcast. I was like, before we had our conversation a couple nights ago, I literally was just like, I went in my journal and I went, oh, look at that. The 28th, the 30th. I wish, I want, I aligned, I release, I do the work. I did a little meditation. I cleared. 2 days later, every single thing I had on that list came true. Cool. Okay, universe. Everything can happen in an instant if you do the work. Figure it out, right? Figure out what's preventing, dedicate yourself to the healing of it. Don't get stuck in the healing of it. Just understand it and move forward from it. So again, what is it that you're running a punishment for? What is it that you're angry for? Later meditate on that. Ask to be shown that. Bring forgiveness. Doesn't need to be big. I forgive you. I release you. It's okay. Like, you did what you could in that time. Like I said, this life beyond doesn't matter. And move into deserving. Like, it's okay. Like, I deserve my highest good to come to me with ease. I'm doing the work. I'm aligning. I'm moving into that space of my vortex and things feeling good. And, now when I have time, I do listen to that stuff that brings me into that level and get me inspired, and just keep choosing to raise. And it will happen fast. It was funny because like one of my clients was asking, they're like, he was saying the same thing, like, why can't it just, like, what's the deal? And they're like, you measure time, right, in your physical timeline. We measure time through vibration. Vibration accelerates with how fast you do the work. So it's like you have a realization, right? You work smart, you figure out what you don't want, you clear it out, focus on what you do, expand it, grow it. It will come to you super fast. It does not adhere to physical timeline. It does not need to take a month to call, like a years to call on your soulmates. It could be a month. If you align, we will deliver, and that's the thing. It's like you do not need, like, just because it took 2 years in the making of being stuck does not mean it needs 2 years to get unstuck. It all has to do with the acceleration of your vibration. So dedicate yourself to accelerating your vibration and you'll get out of it super fast. Don't, and you won't. That's where Lotus walked in and we had to stop recording. And so it's been kind of amazing that this conversation happened, I want to say about 2 weeks ago. And the fast track that we've both been on, but especially James, in just really realigning with his wants and recentering and reconnecting with the laws of the universe and listening a lot, to, books and things that kind of realign him with all of that. Just brought him into such a different space, right now, just mentally and emotionally about work and even more. And so I wanted to include this other chat we had. This one was actually in the cars. We started to chat just about one of his friends and just talking about relationship and how we should show up for people if they're not in a good space. And so you'll hear it picking up from the middle of that. But then he moves a little bit to reflecting about his space with work and where he's feeling. And so I thought it would be really nice to just include this little snippet. Here it is.
Um, so well, no, it just reaffirmed what I was already doing. So no. Which is like, hey, let's stop talking about what you don't want. Yeah. Right. Let's stop living in the past. Yeah, you gotta right. Like you gotta like great. Talking about what you don't want once is a good idea, right? Because it reaffirms what you do want. Then we got to stop talking about what you don't want. And rehashing old shit does not help. Right. That's what I'm taking away from. That was the bottom line. Yeah, yeah. But what if they keep wanting to talk about everything that's wrong? Well, and that's just it. If you keep talking about everything that's wrong, right, then you just keep growing, perpetuating more things that are wrong. And it was funny because she talked about a work environment as well. If you're in a work situation, again, it's like just, you know, so what? The more you focus on, how you feel you're not being recognized or not being appreciated, blah blah blah, the more you're going to feel that way. So that ties into your stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought it was perfect, right? Because I was like, interesting. So did it help change work or the feeling of work? Oh yeah, I mean, I know appreciated at work. Like I know, appreciates me as an employee and as a therapist. And for God's sakes, was it last week before we were talking about, other people calling out, well, and he looked at me and he said, dude, he's like, you're like a unicorn around here. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't have any of these issues with you. He's like, I never have to work. Like, he's like, dude, if you call or text me and say you don't feel well, like, I know you don't feel well, like, legit. Yeah. Like, I know it's not just I just don't feel like coming to work today and I don't care that I have people scheduled, right? He's like, if you see that your schedule is empty and you feel like you want to take a personal day, you text me and say, would it be okay if I take a personal day? Like you ask, you don't just, I'm not coming to work today. And I was like, yeah, because, because you have integrity. Because that's not how you do things.
I really hope you enjoyed our episode today about the space of expectations and just manifesting from that space, understanding, that space and hope. I hope that just listening to our chat about work maybe put some things in perspective for you guys and that you still feel supported by this awesome podcast. I've been enjoying so much creating for you guys. And so, as always, if there's anything you would like for me to cover or talk about, please let me know. Thank you so much again for inviting me into your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Healing with Hila. If you'd like to hear more like that, join me on my Patreon page for exclusive content and my mini podcast, Midnight Thoughts. I'd love to hear more from you. Leave in the comments anything you would like for me to discuss in future episodes. Thank you so much for inviting me into your life. So much love your way.